Horse-drawn transportation has existed ever since the invention of the wheel in Mesopotamia. However, the main problem with it was that it could not be started quickly and it could not be stopped quickly because the horses could not stop fast enough at high speeds. Which is why lever-operated clamps were invented, which stopped the wheels artificially. And this concept, this principle, is still in use currently. Now, the core concept of our project is getting rid of the most terrible, most unpleasant part of braking, which is gliding friction. Instead, we opted to use the mechanism which is used by living creatures for braking. Now, when a living creature moves, how does it brake? It has claws, it has whole systems in its body to control its inertia. It is a whole organism, and this is exactly what we try to replicate. Very well. What kind of goal do you pursue by implementing your invention? There are two goals which are very tightly interconnected. Goal number one is to achieve slow, proper, and safe braking process. The term braking itself is not exactly correct. When we talk about braking, we are talking about stopping. What I'm talking about is to achieve slowing down that is smooth, that is safe, and that is sustainable. And speaking of sustainability, on our planet, 9 people out of 10 are breathing dirty air. And brake pad emissions are far more dangerous than any sort of exhaust. They're called black hole emissions because there is absolutely nothing that can be done. This is the problem that we aimed to eliminate from the equation, and I think we achieved our goal. We created a working model which we spent the last 16 years testing until it was perfected. So here in Georgia we have a working model that proves our concept. Because creation of a model in general is the apex of any scientific research. It is basically a challenge to nature by a human being. It includes research, it includes experimentation, it includes engineering, and so on. And the main goal of our project is to make the means of transportation move on from using brake pads, because these brake pads emit so many harmful substances, such as asbestos, which causes liver cancer. And asbestos and other emissions, they are not only dangerous when inhaled, they also cover the ground, they seep into the soil, and are then consumed as plants by grazing animals, whose meat and milk we later consume in turn. So how does your mechanism work exactly? At the moment, I can only tell you that it works by combining static friction and rolling friction. There is no sliding friction at all. How is your project different from currently existing alternative braking mechanisms? There are no alternative mechanisms to speak of. There are some auxiliary mechanisms, such as retarders, which are used by road trains going downhill, but they still use brake pads as their base. So, gliding friction and the way, for example, a horse brakes using its muscles, these are two different things. Just think of it for a second. Friction is used to create fire, so heat is an unavoidable byproduct. No one intends for braking pads or braking discs to be heated, but they do. Then they crack, they fracture, they cannot be isolated from the environment. In the meantime, our mechanism produces no heat. It can operate in harsh environments, it can operate submerged in oil, submerged in water. That's the main difference. This is its main distinctive feature. It does not use gliding friction. Well then, could you please tell me about the quality of your product, about its sustainability and its longevity? How long does it last? Well, since everyone uses the word braking these days, I will use it too, although it's not exactly applicable to my invention. You see, I view friction as something harmful. For example, if you take the internal combustion engine and remove oil, in 5 or 10 minutes at best it will start rattling. So friction is detrimental for any rotary mechanical movement. So absence of gliding friction, especially the so-called dry friction, opens a world of possibilities. Take a wheel hub, for example. It's a ball bearing. It can work on and on for millions of kilometers. So by distancing ourselves from gliding friction allows us to make a conclusion that our model can be at least 10 times more durable than any other braking pad in existence. So as far as I know, you have a prototype. How does this prototype work exactly? All I can tell you is that it works. It works when installed in a car. It works supposedly even if installed on a plane. Do you know that planes require a brake pad and sometimes full wheel replacement every 500 landings and takeoffs? Our invention will allow to increase this number by at least tenfold. And according to my calculations, in some cases it can even be 30-fold. And what can you tell us about your mechanism's reliability and safety for the consumer? First of all, my invention renders the ABS system obsolete. Because currently, when the braking process begins, it does not slow the disc down, it basically blocks it. ABS exists to stop this from happening. It automatically releases locked brakes. This can be a problem, especially for high-speed cars or, for example, cars used in rallies. Now, our system does away with this whole concept. So when a cheetah runs at a high speed, when he stops, there is no blocking. He slows down. He does it quickly, but he still slows down. And while in modern rallies brake pads and discs are replaced every 1 or 2 laps, our device can last for 30, 40 laps even. And it will warrant replacement only in the most extreme of cases. And the most important part is that our braking mechanism, it prevents the wheels from skidding. Currently, when a driver hits the brakes, the wheels start skidding. They essentially start burning and emitting those harmful compounds, which include but are not limited to sulfur, which is a major pollutant. However, the problem of atmospheric sulfur emissions, it's not currently at the head of an environmental issue because people have no idea how to solve it for now. But we have found a solution. Georgia can go to the European Union with a proposal to completely put gliding friction out of the equation when it comes to driving. And this is precisely what we are aiming for. There are over 3 billion cars in the whole world, which annually produce dozens upon dozens of tons of harmful environmental pollutants. This ruins many lives, this kills people, and we want to put an end to this.
Ваш проект нацелен только на топливных двигателях или на...
Is your invention exclusive for internal combustion engines, or can it be used on electric engines as well? Because, for example, some electric cars, they use the kinetic energy produced by the movement to charge their batteries. I think that electric cars equipped with such a system, and electric cars in general, they cannot be called a breakthrough in transportation. They are a purely cosmetic solution to a problem. I know that they are very important to the EU and to the European environmental standard in general because they do not produce exhaust. But like I said, exhaust fumes are nothing compared to the brake pad emissions. Brake pads and their emissions are way more detrimental to the environment than any exhaust fumes you can think of, and there is still no solution to it. But any electric car, it requires a separate mechanism in addition to the engine to start up, and it requires another mechanism to stop. This creates redundancies, this creates additional systems which occupy space. What is an electric vehicle in general? It's a vehicle that operates using energy provided by a battery. This is it. And the energy capacity of fuel, especially fossil fuel, is much greater than anything a battery can provide. So you claim you have created a new era of braking in the world, right? It all boils down to observation and powers of observation which have been utilized by scientists since Archimedes. I used to deal with physics. I used to deal with issues pertaining to curvature of space. And once I encountered a problem, which I managed to solve, and this allowed me to unite some of the traits and properties of living and non-living matter. So, for example, one of the accepted theories is that entities create events and events generate entities. This is not exactly true, because events don't always do that. Anyway, I was granted this knowledge and I want to share it with the rest of the world. I do not really care if every single user understands how it works, as long as it improves the environmental aspect. That's what matters. The bottom line is that less people will die because of cars. Now, when it comes to planes, it's a bit more complicated, because when a plane is landing, it extends its landing gear, and this landing gear, it does not start braking. It starts spinning, it becomes synchronized with the plane's movement, and then it starts slowing down the plane. It is very inefficient. But for example, if you are in a high-speed elevator, and the elevator is going up or down really fast, you don't really feel it, you don't feel the friction. And this is more or less how my invention works. And it will be free of most mechanical glitches. It will not jerk or twitch, it will not creak or make any other noises, it will not overheat. And if you take a look at a modern braking disc, you will see that it's really a sad, sorry sight. First of all, it's exposed, which means that it is open to sabotage, it is open to damage. Anyone can put a bit of oil inside and this is it. It is also not protected from the elements. It cannot be environmentally sealed because then it will overheat and destroy itself essentially. Our system will have none of that. It will be clean, it will be neat, and most importantly, it will solve the issue of interchangeability. So any technical station, any mechanic would be able to just remove and replace the supports. By supports, I mean the vacuum-sealed tubes with liquid inside. And I think that in the future we are going to get rid even of those. What do you do for a living, and how did you come to the idea of your invention? How did you come up with it? I am a physicist. My thesis is in physics as well, mostly molecular physics, but I am quite good with nuclear physics as well. I was interested in engine construction ever since I was a little boy. And that's exactly what I've been doing for the last 20 years or so, out of which about 16 were dedicated to the issues of braking. Because sometimes you just look at something and see that it is wrong, and you want to correct it. If someone asked me what I consider the biggest breakthrough in this field, in the field of braking, in the field of arresting movement, I would say the greatest invention ever is a horseshoe. Basically, it allows to turn one type of friction into another, and it helps protect the hoof. So yeah, over the last 5,500 years, the best thing humanity has ever come up with in terms of braking is a horseshoe. Everything else is just regurgitation of what we already know and what we already use. The principle on which modern braking mechanisms operate is the same principle used by a whetstone. But these are brakes, these are not whetstones. Brakes provide a service, they need to provide safety, they need to provide comfort. And the way I see it, they don't. We are also currently working on a system for buses and other heavy vehicles, because all of the accidents that buses have going downhill. We have created something that I might call an automatic speed stabilizer, which basically adapts movement speed to the angle of the incline. In essence, the driving force between my inventions and discoveries is, nature itself. I'm just letting nature take its course. I'm basically doing what nature always intended to be done. And nature has given us the tools that we need. But for some reason we still keep using computers, those fragile devices which can get destroyed by dust or magnets. Let electricity be used the way it's supposed to be used, for lighting, for heating and so on. Leave cars out of it. Now let's talk about risks. By creating this device, you have essentially spelled doom for a large amount of companies that produce braking discs and braking pads and so on. And they're not just going to roll over and die. Are you ready to fight them for your invention? Independently, brake pads, brake discs, and the companies that produce them are not really needed by anyone. They are an unfortunate necessity, the way I see it. They are required only because there is no better way. So I say, put a braking disc and my device in front of a car mechanic or a car engineer or a car designer and let them decide for themselves which is better. Because, when it comes to making of a car, the amount of overall resources and capital that goes into the brake pads is minuscule. It's barely 0.1%. And the large companies, Mercedes and the like, which create new cars, which includes electric cars, they are just going to follow the profits, They will use what's profitable for them. But I think that Georgia going to the European Union with this novel idea is something out of the ordinary or something wild, because it's in line with the European Union's ideology of reducing the environmental impact of transportation. And if someone is offering to reduce something that is way, way more harmful than any exhaust, why not accept it? My device does not produce heat, it doesn't produce dust, it doesn't produce any particles. It is easy to install, it is easy to remove, it is easy to service, and I think that following their own ideology, they should accept our proposal. I think we might even involve Greenpeace, because dry friction is a relic of the past. It does not match the current level of our technology. Our engines use energy derived from rotation, but we don't seem to look too close to where exactly it's going. Energy by itself doesn't produce anything, it's not power, it can be used to power something. So those organizations and maybe companies which understand this concept, which understand our idea, they will be open to our invention. I have already sent letter to the Italian company Brembo, which is I think 57 years old and is one of the leaders in brake disc production. In this letter I asked them to participate not in the process of creation but in the process of testing my invention. This company provides up to 130 million euros per year to research and development. They have an R&D center called the Red Kilometer, and they are pumping huge amounts of money into refining the same old concept. My invention has, I think, 25 components. Theirs, the ordinary disc brake, has almost 250, and it includes chemicals like antimony or vanadium or whatever, and almost all of them are harmful to humans. Who would willingly use such a mechanism? I wrote the letter in Italian, out of respect. They didn't even grace me with a response, which means that they're not really interested. So maybe a brake disc producer would not be interested, but a car maker, perhaps? Yeah, but why would an established brake disc company use your invention over improving theirs? And let's say, even if they agree to give your invention a spin, how much would it cost? How much would it cost to install your brakes on a car? Truth be told, I haven't really thought about this in detail. I've only thought about it in general. But you see, my invention is not something that the business world needs or the commerce needs. It's something that the entire world, the people of the world need. My goal is to reduce the number of deaths caused by cars. Deaths of adults, deaths of children, of dogs, of cats, of everyone. So you think that currently existing braking systems are not reliable enough, is that right? When the braking process begins, first the braking disc becomes hot, then it overheats, then microfractures form, which later turn into cracks. In the best case, the disc will simply become bent. In the worst case, it can break. But that's just one side of the problem. Another side, more dangerous, is that when a brake disc heats up, it hits the brake pad, which heats the pistons inside cylinders. So this overheating causes the pistons to lock, which in turn leads to brakes themselves locking. This leads to accidents, which leads to death. So in this regard, the braking process, which utilizes dry friction, is exceptionally dangerous. And there is no viable way to cool those braking discs and pads. So when a bus goes downhill, the majority of the accidents happen because of the brakes. The same goes for trains, by the way. Dry friction brakes means that they cannot really stop in time when needed. Our invention completely rules out overheating and dry friction, because it works off a completely different principle. It doesn't lock the discs, it does not apply mechanical pressure, it simply provides counter-acceleration. And the power of this counter-acceleration can be varied depending on how fast you need to stop the vehicle. Our device doesn't have discs per se. The closest thing that can be compared to a braking disc that our device uses is almost 3 times smaller than the commonly used braking disc. We just have an axle that is connected to the wheels, which is used for slowing down movement. This is all. When we tested our prototype in extreme conditions, the highest temperature extreme was 50 to 60 degrees Celsius, while a braking disc can reach the temperatures up to 1000 degrees in a span of a couple of seconds, and which leads to jamming, which leads to fractures and so on. So the driver essentially loses control of the vehicle. The driver is at the mercy of the brakes. This leads to accidents, and quite frequently. So our invention tackles both consumer safety, driver safety, and the environmental aspect. It provides comfort, it provides the necessary service, and it takes care of the environment, and it doesn't require ABS. Let's get back to the previous question. What exactly does the consumer get from your device? Well, humanity gets cleaner air, while the human gets higher comfort and safer driving. They are all about high speeds, but you have to stop sometime. So our device provides this opportunity. Safe, comfortable, reliable braking at a very accessible price. And easily repairable and replaceable as well. And like I said, there are approximately 3 billion cars in the world. So how many tons of pollution do they produce? I'm not talking about exhaust, I'm talking about braking pads. It's a massive amount. It's millions upon millions of tons of harmful chemicals. But what exactly makes your device different from already existing ones? As was previously said, my device is radically different in concept because it replaces sliding friction with static friction and rolling friction. We arrived at this concept by asking a very simple question. A vast majority of living creatures does not use rotary movements for locomotion. They use rolling movements, cyclical rolling movements, that utilize all of the muscles of their body. Rotation as such is very rarely encountered in the natural world. It's almost non-existent. So I essentially tried to transplant a living organism's locomotion into a machine, which by default utilizes rotary and spinning movements, due to being based, as most of our mechanisms are, on the wheel. Initially, I did not know how to start, but then I decided to utilize the concept of curvature. Curvature is a parameter, it's a middle ground between a circle and a straight line. Many say that a circle is just a collection of tiny straight lines, of tiny angles, but this is not true. Eventually we managed to find the parameter, the trait, which connects animate and inanimate objects, which led us to conclude that rolling friction and static friction, both of which are utilized by a ball bearing, it's very practical, it's very useful and can be used. They can be integrated into our mechanisms and they can be used to achieve the results we desire. Alright, so I wonder if someone comes along, an investor or a company that would express interest in your invention and offer to invest in it, would you be interested? Would you cooperate with them? Would you work with them? Of course, any company or investor who is interested is free to pitch their offer to us. But regardless of this, we are going to make an offer to the European Union and the entirety of the world in general for brake discs and brake pads to be taken out of everyday use. That's our main goal, protecting the people and protecting the environment. So, whenever a person is driving his car, and if he knows that his brake discs, his brake system is cheap or poorly made, it's like playing Russian roulette. He doesn't know which speed he should maintain, he doesn't know when he should brake, he doesn't know how he should brake. We want to remove the barrel of the pistol from his head, we want to make him stop caring about his brakes. We want to give our drivers more confidence, we want to make them less afraid of going at high speeds because they don't know how they're going to brake. This is especially true for people living in mountainous areas. So our ambitions actually have substance. Guaranteed safety, guaranteed environmental safety, and increase the confidence of the drivers. If someone is interested, they are more than welcome to make us an offer. But we want drivers and passengers to feel safe, regardless of what sort of transportation they're using, a car, a plane, even a bicycle. What were your initial goals? My initial plan was to create a working model, a working prototype. Like I said, this is a challenge that a scientist puts before nature. And depending on the result, depending on how viable the challenge is, further course of action is defined. It took us 16 years to achieve, and we finally achieved it, in Georgia, I must say. We experimented in many countries, such as Azerbaijan, for example. But our previous models, they more or less still used dry friction, they used cogs, they used oil. But for the current model, oil is entirely optional. So we have achieved this milestone, we have created a working model. The nature has responded to our challenge with grace. And even though it took many years to achieve, our main goal is still ahead. We are going to have to fight against a concept that is 5,500 years old. The concept of the wheel, which is ingrained into humanity's thinking. I have already mentioned my desire to connect the straight line and the circle, the desire to connect animate and inanimate matter, and this cannot be achieved quickly. This takes a lot of observation, this takes research, this takes experimentation, and so on. There is a reason why most of modern science and science in general is based on observation. You look at something, you wonder what it is, you make theories, you test them. Next, we are going to be created a range of models. Modules fit not only for cars, but also for bicycles, for trucks, for road trains, and eventually for planes. After doing some cost evaluation, we concluded that our invention is 3 times cheaper than any modern brake disc or pad, while offering much greater longevity and reliability. To put it shortly, it is as reliable as a ball bearing. All this is a bit difficult to make independently, not to mention that it requires testing, so we are definitely going to need a partner. And another pet dream of ours is to actually make a completely environmentally friendly car here in Georgia. It will most likely be an electric car, since it doesn't produce exhaust fumes, but it will also have our braking system, which means that it will not produce any harmful chemicals at all. But that's just a pet project for the far future. Our most pressing and immediate concern is to replace the braking systems of existing vehicles, to render the current braking systems obsolete, which is why we are so heavily car-oriented. Depending on how successful we are going to be, we can launch in parallel model ranges for planes, for trucks, and so on. Ideally, we would like to make it so that car producers would be able to make their own braking systems without having to rely on subcontractors like Brembo. So, like I said, there are 500 scientists working for the Brembo R&D department, and 130 million euros get spent on them every year. A car manufacturer will not have to deal with these guys anymore, with these companies. Because all of the parts that we use for our models, they have been tested. They have been tested by time and experience. A ball bearing has been invented centuries ago. So I think car manufacturers are going to profit from it as well. That's my plan in general.
Мы на стандартных вещах это делаем, подшипник испытан, это испытано, так что поэтому это будет очень удобно для и автомобильных компаний, честно я вам скажу, не только для водителей. Вот так, вот такой план.
Here you can see how our braking device works. We use ordinary braking pads for comparison. Now, it's not readily visible here because it requires extreme pressure. But our invention does not utilize dry friction, and it can adapt to a variety of speeds, and you can see how efficiently it slows the vehicle down. It can stop on demand without using ABS, and it provides maximum safety regardless of speed. As you can see, it perfectly regulates the speed and the momentum of the vehicle. As I have already mentioned before, Our invention can work under extreme conditions, it is not afraid of water, and it can work with or without oil. It makes no difference in regard to the driver's safety, as I will demonstrate. So we are pouring oil in here, and we are going to demonstrate to you how it works. Also, pay attention to noise levels. They are very low to begin with, but when the mechanism is oiled, it runs almost completely silent. And this is the other angle. As you can see, the axle is slowing down. And as I said before, there is absolutely no dry friction involved.